Oh, 7 o'clock.
Yep, I'm hearing it on this end too.
Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone on YouTube Live. If you're out there, we are glad to have everyone with us tonight. And I imagine that some people will be joining as we get started here.
So welcome to this third session of the Song of God, the course on the Bhagavad Gita. So hello, Bill. Hello, Bria. So I think we will go ahead and begin with some silence.
Actually, we're going to begin like we did last week.
Okay.
Thanks, Will. You handed me the ball, right? Is that
Sure.
correct?
Yeah.
Great. So we're going to begin like we did last week, where we'll sit for about 15 minutes, and I'm going to read a passage from the Gita. And the invitation is, I'll read it 3 times. So about every 4 minutes, I'll read it. And the invitation is just to listen and see what resonates for you, what words or phrases kind of stick out or are highlighted in your heart and mind as you hear it. And then, you can meditate on that part of the passage if that feels right to you, or you can let it go. But just to take a little bit of note and notice what sings in your heart, if anything. So, and then at the end of our meditation, we'll have a little time to just share about what that was like for you and what words or phrases came forward. So as you're ready, I invite, one thing I want to say is this particular, the whole Gita is the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna, or Krishna and Arjuna. And the same is true for this passage. So this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna. So you have the context of what's going on and who the players are in it. So as you're ready, you can close your eyes or have a soft gaze and just come into a settled place, into your heart. Take some breath in. And just relax into your body and into your heart center, allowing whatever's been going on during the day to just be released, kind of melt off of your mind and your body and just wash it away for now. And anything that maybe still needs tending to, just to let it be in the background for a while so you can fully enter into this time and this space. A leaf, a flower, a fruit, or even water offered to me in devotion, I will accept as a loving gift of a dedicated heart. Whatever you do, make it an offering to me. The food you eat or worship you perform, the help you give, even your suffering. Thus will you be free from karma's bondage, from the results of action, good and bad. I am the same to all beings. My love is always the same. Nevertheless, those who meditate on me with devotion, they dwell in me, and I shine forth in them. a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or even water offered to me in devotion, I will accept as the loving gift of a dedicated heart. Whatever you do, make it an offering to me. The food you eat or worship you perform, the help you give, even your suffering. Thus will you be free from karma's bondage, from the results of action, good and bad. I am the same to all beings. My love is the same always. Nevertheless, those who meditate on me with devotion, they dwell in me, and I shine forth in them. a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or even water offered to me in devotion, I will accept as the loving gift of a dedicated heart. Whatever you do, make it an offering to me. The food you eat or worship you perform, the help you give, even your suffering. Thus will you be free from karma's bondage, from the results of action, good and bad. I am the same to all beings. My love is the same always. Nevertheless, those who meditate on me with devotion, they dwell in me, and I shine forth in them. Well, hello, everyone. Just want to open a space for a little reflection time on what stood out for you as you come back from that meditation. Maybe it's still resonating in your heart, so you may not feel like talking right away, and I'm aware of that. So just be with it for a moment, and when you're ready, you can unmute yourself and any words or phrases that came forward.
Well, Cynthia, thank you for that. And actually what came forward was a quote that came through my brain, which is, there's useless, unnecessary suffering, and there's useful, necessary suffering. And there's a distinction, and that scripture really reminded me that suffering takes us sometimes to where we need to go. It's just staying there can then create the useless, unnecessary suffering.
Thank you, Janet.
I guess what stood out to me was the part about, like, the beginning was a leaf and then there was bigger actions, I guess. Like it didn't seem to matter if it was small or big. It was more like the intention behind it, I guess. That so it reminds me of like a child who might pick a flower, and give it to their mom as a gift, a little tiny flower, maybe it's a dandelion or something, and it's that love behind it, right? The intention behind it is just as valid as if someone, gave you a huge thing or did a huge thing for you. It's that sincere, kind, loving act that someone might do, no matter how big or small. So that's what stood out to me. It's all honored, I guess, and cherished in God. It's what's behind it that matters. So someone else could give like a Ferrari, but maybe not from love or kindness, or or not from a good intention. So it's not the price of it or the amount of it or the bigness of it. It's more the intention behind it, I guess, and the love behind it.
Thank you.
When I said that, I actually do know someone that happened to. A friend of mine's husband gave her a very expensive car for their anniversary, but they didn't have a good marriage and they weren't together, and he just gave her this as a, here you go. Now I'm going to go off and do my own thing. And I knew this other couple that didn't really have much money, but they loved each other, and they made cards for each other and made gifts for each other and spent the night together in a really loving way. And so when I heard of both stories, I thought, well, that seemed more, had that true heart behind it, rather than here's an expensive car and, I don't really care about you, but here we go. So that's
it's the devotion that was in there, right? The dedication, the devotion to the divine becomes the aspiration of the heart.
Exactly.
In our giving. Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful analogy there, or metaphor for, Anyone else? Jim.
It's always historically bugged me that we present the divine as needing all this worship and all this attention. And this time I got, maybe the divine is just telling me what works. It's not for me, it's for you. It's not for the divine, it's for me. Or whoever, Arjuna in this case. And something has shifted for me. I'm starting to hear scripture more on that line than previous line. So the only surprise I had was even give me your suffering. I would have thought the word would have been especially give me your suffering. So it's the only thing that caught me.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that idea of make everything an offering to me, kind of like what Jim was pointing out. It's a bit of a strange idea. So what does it really mean, and how do you make an offering? How do I make an offering out of eating dessert, which I really enjoy? You know, how is that an offering? How is that an offering to anybody but me? And so that kind of got me looking a little broader and sort of thinking, well, okay, if this is a living universe and I'm a participant in it, then how does that matter, and how does it work, and why would that work? And something that was said a little bit earlier about, you know, the devotion and the idea and Jim said it too, is the idea that this isn't for God. It's really more for my communion. And you know, the sort of the first face of God is that, you know, within me, I am the first person. And so how do I make an offering of everything that I do? And that seems to me like a really valuable practice to, you know, if I can manage to do it, which, you know, most of the time I'm forgetting, but how to make everything I do an offering. It's like it changes, it creates a different perspective and a different way of being. So I guess that's about it.
That's really beautiful, the way you are unpacking that, or it's coming to you. I mean, one thing is, you know, if you're changing a dirty diaper on a baby, is that an offering? How does that become an offering of everything I do when it's not the most pleasant job, or cleaning the toilets or whatever, you know? And yet, some of the mystics talk about everything they did, or, you know, how do you bless everything you do? Because this one precious life that we have, that was given to us, the breath that is God breathing us. And if that breath was gone, we would notice, as we said, I think it was last week we talked about that, or maybe the week before. And so, yeah, what does that mean to make everything an offering? Even the smallest thing, and even the most unpleasant thing, or the most pleasant thing. And who is the offering to? The highest self, as what you were bringing out, I think, Cabot, is, you know, that highest self of the divine within each of us.
Isn't it a question of mindfulness? If you do things mindfully, like taking the time to be aware of what you're actually doing and slowing down, then that slowing down puts you in touch, I think, with Brahman, with God. It's what, yeah, just being mindful, all as much as possible in everything that you do, slowing down and just doing what you have to do, but being mindful of what you're doing. I think consciousness of what you're doing, that becomes, I think, a gift too, an offering to God.
Yeah.
Gratefulness.
Marianne?
Are we all mystics here?
Who's speaking? I can't tell.
Aren't we all mystics here?
Oh, right. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. I don't know, but I am. I hope to be one with God. So, Marianne, did you have something you want to
Yeah,
say?
I think it's gratitude and appreciation, and we're giving to ourselves because we're part of God, or we are God, or part of God, and it doesn't matter what it is as long as we do it from the right place in our heart. And that's why it really, because I'm with Jim, and I don't think God wants us to be giving things to him. That makes God the human being, and God doesn't need that kind of accolades. But it's when we give, if we give to the heart, it's with or from the heart, like Bria said, it's with gratitude. And that from that place, anything can be beautiful. Changing the baby's diaper, the fact that you have that beautiful baby to change the diaper for, or to wash the dirty dishes, it's all done from the right space. And I think that's kind of the interpretation I got.
Absolutely.
I think doing it with love, even if it is, I was just thinking, because I always do the bathroom in my house. I'm the one who washes the bathroom. So if I was really doing it with love, thinking, oh, I'm cleaning this bathroom, not just because it's a room that needs to be cleaned, but it's for my roommates, right? It's for me and for my roommates. Doing it with love, I think, is the changes, if you're changing a dirty diaper, but you're doing it with love towards this baby, as opposed to, in an angry kind of resentful way. It's going to be very different, right? The baby will feel it too, right? Whether it's love or it's anger.
Right. And in India, if any of you have been there or know about India, is everything, pretty much every equipment, every tool they have, they bless. If they get a car, for example, they do a whole ceremony to bless it and bring the spirit in, basically. I don't think it's in Hinduism, it might not be called the spirit, but it's to bring in God's energy into that and give appreciation and gratitude, like Marianne was saying about for what this element or this tool or this device is doing and giving of itself to us. So computers, you'll see flowers all over the computer, and there's a whole blessing of the equipment. And so the same is true of the diapers or our shoes that get us around everywhere. All of these things are offerings to our life. The one thing that for me, first of all, this is one of my favorite passages of the Gita. And I think all of you know that my meditation teacher is Eknatheshwaran, and he's Hindu. He's not in his body anymore, but the practice that I learned from him that I've now it's still part of my life, but I also practice just in the heart, focus on the heart. But the practice is memorizing passages. So this would be one passage to memorize and just repeat silently in your meditation time. And he would say that what you remember in your mind then drips to your heart. And then you become that throughout the day. So everything is an offering. Make everything an offering to me. When I meditate on that continuously, it does become a part of my life. It reminds me of A Course in Miracles in a way, Miriam, that, you meditate on those passages each day. And even though they change, they just start becoming a part of your daily life and your actions in the world. And so for me to have the place of knowing, and I don't say I'm perfect at it by any means, but if I could make every part of my life in devotion to the Lord, to the divine, I don't know what more I could ask, because it's that last part of this, well, it's a longer passage in this, but the last part I read was, those who meditate on me with devotion They dwell in me, and I shine forth in them. So let's take, for example, and I'm going to close this for now because we need to move on, but take, for example, all the protests that are happening right now, which are really, I think, really, for me, very important what's happening there. And yet, if everyone started from that place, or most everyone started from that place of thinking my every action is for the divine or for the good of an offering, what a difference it would be. You know, how they showed up to show their action in service to the highest, if you will. So anyway, it was a pleasure to share that with you. And I invite you to continue to be with it and be with what that means in your life. If it has resonance of how you show up in every action, or as much as you can to be in remembrance of God. So thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you all for this very rich conversation. I love the questions, and tonight's kind of presentation, we're going to go through a few chapters with, in a certain sense, holding this question throughout. As you can imagine, for me as a scientist, and someone who was really brought up originally in essentially the Western philosophical, scientific way of thinking, all this business about God needing love and devotion just seemed so primitive. And in fact, really kind of self-indulgent on God's part. And what I've discovered over the years is there's a very deep secret hidden here. And that the entire Gita builds slowly towards this secret, which is actually identified at the very end of the Gita as the supreme secret. And the teachings are all this incredibly beautiful orchestration of the different strands and almost like the interweaving of truth and love, kind of going back and forth. But the fuel for the whole thing is the power of love in the heart. And the essence of the reason why Krishna says to make every act an offering in devotion to me, and the reason why the first commandment of Christ is to love God with all your strength, mind, heart, and soul, is because love is the fire, the fuel, and the power that unites us to that supreme mystery, which is called God, but which is none other than our deepest self. Excuse me. And so we'll get into that, and we'll see how the Gita is moving in that direction. I want to begin tonight with just a very brief chant of one of the shlokas, because the Gita, after all, is the song of God. And so it is, like many scriptures, intended to be chanted. Now, this is kind of my Western will keepin version, so my Sanskrit is poor accent and all of that. But just to give you a flavor, it has a particular meter and rhythm, and the whole Gita then comes forth as this kind of musical recitation that is actually bringing in a transmission. And unlike the Bible, the vast majority of the Gita is the speech of God. This is God directly speaking to the hearer. The same way that you have in the Quran. The Quran is the speech of God, in the sense that, you know, it's basically the voice of God being recorded. That's the understanding. Same thing here. Obviously, when Arjuna is asking the questions, that's the voice of the human. But the responder, the one who answers those questions is the divine being. Now that divine being has taken the form of Krishna. But when Krishna responds to Arjuna, as you study and delve into the Gita, you have to realize that Krishna speaks from different levels of his being, all the way to his transcendent form, his immanent form, and the various different levels of the divine manifestation speak through Krishna at different points throughout the Gita. But the essence of it is the song of God. So it is a transmission to the human soul from God. And so here's one of the shlokas, which is one of my favorites. Man mana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosi me. So that is God speaking to the human soul. And basically the words are, fill your mind with me. Devote yourself to me. Make every act an offering to me. And hold thyself as nothing before me. And you shall come to me. You shall become one with me. This is my promise to you, for you are dear to me. And the teaching here is identical to the teaching that we find from Rumi, from Christ, particularly in these devotional traditions, which is that the one prerequisite for the human being to become one with God is to relinquish the identity with the separate self, with the egoic self, and really even the egocentricity. So it's all about coming into a place of supreme, ultimately it's a kind of humility, a humility rooted in awe of realizing this supreme mystery of life, the fact that we're here, the fact that we can feel, the fact that we can sense in the depths of our heart this larger ultimate mystery, which we feel inklings of. That's what faith is. Faith is this glimmer of something larger, something grander, something glorious. And we yearn for that, we reach for that. And the strength of that yearning is the key here. And basically, the reason, as I understand it, for the whole instruction to do acts of devotion is to deepen that thread of longing and yearning in the heart that actually is the fuel that takes us back to God, that unites us with the Supreme. And this is something, to me, that is really foundational to the spiritual path and really different from the scientific philosophical path, and yet not absent from the true mystical tradition, from the true Hermetic philosophical tradition, which, as I said in one of my talks some time back, there are these different levels. There's the mystical, and then the Gnostic, and then the divine plane, and then the sacred magic coming right down into the manifest plane. So there's a descent from the highest levels of the absolute Godhead down through the different levels, which are represented in the different levels of consciousness, whether it's of the Gita or of the Kabbalah, or any of these different esoteric systems. And the whole point is that we, in our unrealized state, are walking around on this physical level And what we need to do is to elevate our consciousness to complete that verticality, that vertical descent. We have to kind of replicate in reverse through an ascent up, through our aspiration of the heart. And acts of devotion and love are working with the fundamental fuel that will take us up and into that highest level. And this is just as true in Buddhism even, and the non-theistic traditions. There's a beautiful line that I quoted, sometime I'll bring it out, it's very important, from the Tibetan master, Urgyen Rinpoche, who maybe some of you have heard of, but in Tibetan Buddhism, he's the actual biological father of Mingyur Rinpoche and Tsoknyi Rinpoche, are two of the greatest recognized contemporary lamas in Tibetan Buddhism. And he's their father, so it's quite an enlightened family, if you will. And he basically stresses the importance of devotion. And he says that without devotion, that is the reason people meditate for years and get nowhere. He says, people come to me all the time and they say, I've been doing all the practices, I've been meditating, I've been doing it, but not much is happening. And Sri Krishna Prem, who I'll be quoting later, says the same thing. What is lacking in those people who practice for years but don't actually seem to get anywhere is this transformative fire of the heart. That is the key. That is really essential. And in the case of Buddhism, it's devotion to the Dharma. Devotion. You're not loving God in the same way. Devotion to the truth. But it is a passionate, unbridled commitment, a strong conviction in the heart that burns like a fire. And as Rumi says, it burns away all the veils of separation. So that is what the Gita is really talking about. As it moves through the different practices, it continues to come back repeatedly to this importance of devotion. And that's why I called this course, why we are calling this course, Divine Love in the Bhagavad Gita, because it's really, and as I talk about in Belonging to God, over half the chapters in the Gita end with this injunction of supreme devotion will take you to God. Ramakrishna says it very beautifully. Knowledge of God will get you into the divine courtyard only. Devotion to God will get you into the bedchamber. The most intimate communion and relationship and union with God happens through this power of devotion. And so all the acts of devotion are trainings. And they're trainings to recognize that we are walking in a sacred world. We are literally in the kingdom of heaven now, as Jesus says, but we don't see it. It's laid out before us and we don't see it. And so we just stumble through this magical wonderland of mystical revelation as if it's just a bunch of collection of objects. So the Gita is really training us to see God in everything. That's the whole purpose of chapter 7, chapter 10. We're going to go through that briefly now. So let me come to my screen share here. Hopefully this works. Host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Just
Okay.
try it again.
So Garrett, I'm now the co-host. Okay, thank you, Garrett. Garrett's always there right at the moment you need him. It's amazing. Okay, now, of course, I gotta find, I think this is it. If I'm lucky, this is the right week. Is it the right week? Is this week 3 or week 2? I'm sorry to not, I find it very frustrating that I can't tell. It looks like it's correct. Okay, here we go. Sorry. You're not supposed to see ahead here. Okay, here we go. So, okay, it doesn't seem to be behaving properly. Okay, here we go. So, as we come through here, it's just reminding you of some of the different schools that the Gita is integrating. These pictures get in the way sometimes in Zoom. I don't know how to get them out of the way. Okay, so just a reminder, these are the levels of consciousness in the Gita. Don't worry about the specific names, but just notice the number of them. There's 7 levels. These 7 levels are essentially found in different forms across all esoteric traditions, if you will. And this is by way of review, so I'm going to skip over it. The self is eternal and never dies. I left these things in just to remind us of where we are. What is the foundation? You were never born, you will never die, you have never changed. So we are unborn, eternal, immutable, immemorial. This is what we are working to realize. So here's where we are now starting today in this teaching around action and inaction. This is a very important and deep teaching of the Gita in chapter 4. The wise see that there is action in the midst of inaction and inaction in the midst of action. Their consciousness is unified and every act is done with complete awareness. And so this then leads to this statement at the end of this chapter. The wise, ever satisfied, have abandoned all external supports. Their security is unaffected by the results of their action. Even while acting, they really do nothing at all. Free from expectations and from all sense of possession with mind and body, firmly controlled by the self, their karma is incinerated by the fire of wisdom. This is a really profound teaching. And basically, what it's saying at my level of understanding, which I am not offering as absolute because I think there are levels and depths to these things. But the bottom line is that when we are connected to the inmost source, then what happens is that source is the actor and we are the instrument. And so even as we are seeming to be acting, it is another agent that is doing the action. It reminds me of Eugene Callender, a wonderful Baptist. I think he was Baptist. I'm not sure about his denomination, but he was a very remarkable activist priest in Harlem, New York. And he had all these wonderful projects going, serving the homeless and doing different kinds of service in the community. And he was asked once, how do you do all these things? How do you possibly accomplish all these things? And he said, oh, I do nothing. I just stand still and God pushes me around. That is the meaning of this. That although he's moving constantly in the world, he's standing still. God pushes him around. So God is the actor, and that is the action in the midst of inaction. He himself is simply in that inner devotional contemplative poise, and then the divine is acting. And then there's, so in a sense, that's also his inaction in the midst of action. He says, I don't do anything. He's not the doer. The Gita constantly stresses that you are not the doer. And there's a couple of different levels of this, one of which is called the gunas, which I think I'm not going to go into right now because I want to keep moving here through our time here. So let me move on to the next teaching. So here we come into chapter 7. And here's one of the many places where the Gita starts to speak to this teaching. Unwavering in devotion, always united with me, the man or woman of wisdom surpasses all the others. To them, I am the dearest beloved, and they are very dear to me. So here's this whole teaching around the power of love that unites the disciple with God and God with the disciple. Then Krishna says, all those who follow the spiritual path are blessed. And of course, the Gita outlines several different pathways. But the wise who are always established in union, for whom there is no higher goal than me, may be regarded as my very self. So this is the teaching that those who are always established in union, for whom there's no higher goal, basically, once they have realized that place, they are literally in that state of union and therefore may be regarded as God's very self. And then he talks about this very important teaching around true devotion and proper devotion. when a person is devoted to something with complete faith, I unify his faith in that. When faith is completely unified, one gains the object of devotion. In this way, every desire is fulfilled by me. Those whose understanding is small attain only transient satisfaction. Those who worship the gods go to the gods, but my devotees come to me. This is a very important teaching in the Gita. What Krishna is basically saying is whatever you love, that is what you become in a sense. What you give your attention to is what and who you become. And he says at one point in there, those who worship anything other than me, I honor that faith. I will fulfill that faith, but they actually worship wrongly. Not morally wrong, but they haven't realized the highest form of worship. And basically what he's saying is the highest form of worship is to worship the absolute itself. To worship Krishna, but Krishna understood as the supreme Godhead and basically the supreme source that is who we are. It's a very interesting thing because this is the essence of who we are. Atman is Brahman. So in some sense, you're kind of worshiping yourself. Of course, the ego gets a hold of that and it becomes, megalomania and messianic delusion. So this is tricky territory. And of course, there are many who have fallen into that messianic delusion. But the reality is that this is where humility comes into it. And this is where devotion has the power, because the devotion takes you to something beyond the ego. The devotion pierces the mind and goes straight through the heart of the ego, right into the heart of God. Just the way that Cloud of Unknowing talks about it. It is that sharp dart of longing love that pierces through the veils of ignorance and takes us into the very heart of the essence of the Supreme. And when we do that, as Krishna says here in chapter 8, I am easily attained by the person who always remembers me and is attached to nothing else. This is really important because this is why, as Jesus says at one point, thank you, God, for revealing these things to the pure and the simple. And the pure of heart shall see God. So the idea is that attachment, that purity of attachment through the heart is the key. And that is what enables a person to realize God. It does not depend on how brilliant you are, how dedicated and your outer actions. It really comes down to this pure essence in your heart and your self-giving to that. And then what happens, this Supreme Lord, the Supreme Spirit who pervades all of existence, the true self of all creatures, may be attained through one pointed devotion. So this kind of continues. And in some way, it's funny because since I've pulled out these verses, it sort of looks like Krishna's saying nothing else. He actually says lots of different things. And there's a lot of richness in the Gita, which we're kind of skimming over in order to kind of focus on certain themes here. There are certain themes that also are united and aligned with the teachings of Christ, which I find very significant. And I have some teaching around that next week as to why that's the case, which we won't get into tonight. Teaching / my own ideas about that. But in chapter 9, which is called, the royal yoga, the royal road of the royal science of yoga. And yoga is the science of union with God. And at one point, Krishna says it again, those who worship me and meditate on me constantly without any other thought. So it's this undivided attention. This is really, really important. This is the Gita's way of putting something that Rumi also says. That, Rumi talks about, an idle devotion is not enough. A kind of aspiration and occasionally thinking about God and aligning oneself with the scriptures and with what God says is not enough. There has to be this burning fire moment to moment. There has to be this constant longing, this aching, this burning essence that dwells in you. That's why thinking of it as a fire is good because a flame of love is constant, but it's constantly burning. It doesn't stop burning or it wouldn't be a flame. And so that devotion, that longing, that fire of love in the heart is like a burning flame. And when that is constantly going and one is in, that's the reason for this constant remembrance, this constant prayerful remembrance, because it keeps that flame burning. And what it does is it keeps that vertical half. Remember I said that the Godhead descends down into the manifest realm. The Godhead incarnates in this cascading levels of incarnation. And the human being needs to then complete that loop of love, the vertical side of it, internally from our side. And this is done by this, what's called worship, what's called worship and meditation. These are just words. It's really that fire of love in the heart that that completes this sacred loop. And without any other thought, meaning it's not that other thoughts don't come in, but it's like this is front and center. And then what Krishna promises is, I will provide for all their needs. And then he says this thing, those who worship other gods in faith and devotion also worship me, even if they do not observe the usual forms. I am the object of all worship. It's in joy and it's Lord. But those who fail to realize my true nature must be reborn. That's, of course, the Hindu understanding that you are reborn continually until you fully realize the essence of God. And then he says the same thing again. Those who worship the Devas go to the Devas. Those who worship their ancestors will be united with them after death. Those who worship phantoms will become phantoms. So this is a warning even. You know, those who worship sort of dark spirits will go and become dark spirits. But my devotees will come to me. So it's a very remarkable thing, this teaching that which you give your heart to, you become. As Jesus said, for where your treasure is, your heart will be also. And so it's very important for us to choose to which we give our heart. And, you know, I've thought about this a lot in terms of, you know, people who spend their lives poring over, you know, their investment portfolios. And that's the first thing they look at. And that's what they deal with, you know, day in and day out. Where are they going to be at the moment of the cosmic dissolution of their physical existence? Part of the purpose of spiritual practice is to get your heart aligned with the cosmic source and essence. And then just as Jesus says, you know, God in me and I in God, those who worship with me with love live in me and I in them. So this is this completion. This is the reason for the devotion. It's not so that God gets loved. God doesn't need our love as at one level. But at another level, God wants us to participate in the fullness of the divine mystery while in human form. And this is done through this cycle of love. So those who worship me with love live in me. So we actually are transformed into living in God. And then God comes to life in us. And then, as all the scriptures say, you know, even those who've gone astray. I mean, Jesus came, you know, to call the sinners, right? To basically call all those who were lost back to God. Krishna says the same thing. Even sinners, they become holy when they take refuge in me alone. Their souls quickly conform to Dharma and they attain to boundless peace. Never forget this, Arjuna. No one who is devoted to me will ever perish. This is the promise of eternal life, the same teaching that we find from Jesus. And so then we have here at the end of chapter 9, and this is the halfway point in the Gita, we have what is called the the first half of the supreme secret. He's building toward it. So here he says again, all those who take refuge in me, and when he says whatever their birth, race, sex, or caste will attain the supreme goal, this is because, as you know, India is very much hierarchical and structured in the society based on your birth, on your caste, sex, racial divisions. You know, there's a lot of structural injustice in the Indian society. And this is a very important teaching coming from Krishna, because he's basically saying, taking refuge in me cuts through all of that, and you will attain the supreme goal. This can be realized even by those whom society scorns. So there's an explicit statement that those of the lowest caste, and elsewhere he mentions women and the lower castes, because women, of course, were subjugated. And it was very radical to have a scripture saying that women can realize me just as readily as the highest Brahmin can realize me. Therefore, having been born in this transient and forlorn world, give all your love to me. And then here is the first half of the supreme secret, which I chanted at the beginning this evening. Fill your mind with me, love me, serve me, worship me always. Seeking me in your heart, you will at last be united with me. So at this point, we now move into 2 chapters that are often regarded as the kind of culmination of the whole Bhagavad Gita. They aren't, but they are very much of a dramatic high point. Chapters 10 and 11. Chapter 10 is the imminent revelation of the divine, and chapter 11 is the transcendent revelation. So in this imminent revelation, and these are just some excerpts, where Krishna basically reveals who he is. And he basically says these various kind of prophetic declarations. I am the true self in the heart of every creature, Arjuna, the beginning, middle, and end of their existence. Among purifying forces, I am the wind. I am the beginning, middle, and end of creation. I am death, which overcomes all, and the source of all beings still to be born. I am the feminine qualities. I don't know quite why these are called feminine, but he names these here: fame, beauty, perfect speech, memory, intelligence, loyalty, forgiveness. I am the seed that can be found in every creature, for without me nothing can exist, neither animate nor inanimate. And he goes through all of these, and part of the practice here is to learn to see God in everything. It's actually a discipline, and this is a revelation to Hindus who work with this chapter and these teachings to actually learn to train themselves to see the divine being shining through all these different manifest forms. And then Krishna says something very beautiful at the end here. He says, but there's no end to my divine attributes. I've mentioned only a few. Wherever you find strength, beauty, or power, you may be sure these have sprung from a spark of my essence. But what if use is to know all these things? Just remember that I am, and I support the entire cosmos with only a tiny fragment of my being. So here we have this teaching that God is much bigger than the entire physical universe. And the entire physical universe is just a tiny part of the divine being. It's hard for me to, I don't know how to say this, because it's hard for me to impart the depth of what I feel and have been blessed to sense and perceive by working with the Gita for so many years. That last passage has the feel, having read it and contemplated it for all these different years, I feel that there is a transcendent revelation of God coming into the human heart, basically saying, come with me into this infinite vastness of cosmic existence. Don't stay limited to the physical universe. The physical universe is a glorious revelation. And it has all of these different reflections of my being. And so this whole imminent revelation of God is basically God showing us this kind of magical mystery tour through the revelation that is the book of nature, if you will. But Krishna, at the very end, he's saying, but this is just the beginning. This is but just the tiniest glimpse. Come with me. Come with me to the next level. And Arjuna at the beginning of the next chapter, who is now in a place of total awe, and he basically says to Krishna, I am just overwhelmed. I am just so grateful. I had no idea who you were. You were walking around like this charioteer. You were hiding yourself from me. And now you're revealing yourself to me. And then Arjuna says, but don't stop there, You just told me, this is just the tiniest part of my being, this whole cosmos. And you've just revealed to me how you yourself are this divine being that shines through every manifest form throughout the entire universe. But you're saying this is the tiniest part of your being. Show me more. Show me who you are. So Arjuna has that fire of longing. Like, don't hold back, Krishna, don't hold back. I stand here ready to receive everything that you can reveal to me. And that is the spirit. It's like, come what may, I want the full enchilada. Show it. Reveal thyself to me. And it's a very strong, potent aspiration of the heart that is kind of fearless. It's like, come what may, I don't care. Show me who you are. Take me into your heart, and let me see who you are. And to hell with what happens to me, because this is so glorious and so grand. I want nothing other than union with thee. There's that kind of powerful aspiration. It's related to that longing of the reed torn from the reed bed that Rumi speaks of at the beginning of the Masnavi, where he's basically saying the reed torn from its reed bed sings its song of lament, longing to be reunited with its source. And this is, Arjuna's in this place. He's seeing this. He's incredibly enchanted, but now he's beyond enchantment into wondrous awe. And he's saying, show me the fullness of thy divine being. And so Krishna responds. So we go back to this, if I can now get back to it. I'm sorry here. I hope I can get back. Trying to get back to, maybe it's here. Sorry for the delay here. Hopefully I found it. I think this is it. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Garrett, for coming to the rescue. And so here is one of the forms. Of course, this is artistic vision here that is shown to Arjuna. And here what you see are these different heads of God. And Krishna says, Arjuna then beholds the seeing, the revelation of Krishna, the transcendent, the cosmic vision. And Arjuna says, it's as if 1,000 suns were to rise in the heavens at the same time. The blaze of their light would resemble the splendor of this supreme spirit. And there within the body of the God of gods, Arjuna saw all the manifold forms of the universe united as one. And with heads and arms and mouths, Arjuna said, I see infinite mouths and arms, stomachs and eyes. You are embodied in every form. I see you everywhere without beginning, middle, or end. You are the Lord of all creation, and the cosmos is your body. You wear a crown and carry a mace and discus. Your radiance is blinding and immeasurable. I see you, who are so difficult to behold, shining like a fiery sun, blazing in every direction. You are the supreme, changeless reality. You are the one thing to be known. You are the refuge of all creation, the immortal spirit, the eternal guardian of eternal Dharma. And he says, "Oh Vishnu, I see your eyes shining with open mouth. You glitter in an array of colors and your body touches the sky. I look at you and my heart trembles. I have lost all courage and all peace of mind." So Arjuna now is just literally trembling before the majestic and supreme glory of the divine revelation. And then he starts to, really come into a certain kind of terror at this. And he says, "When I see your mouths with their fearful teeth, burning like fires at the end of time, I forget where I am and I have no place to go. Oh Lord, you are the support of the universe. Have mercy on me. As rivers flow into the ocean, I see all the warriors of this world passing into your fiery jaws. All creatures rush to their destruction like moths into a flame. You lap the worlds into your burning mouths and swallow them. Filled with your terrible radiance, O Vishnu, the whole of creation bursts into flames. Tell me who you are, O Lord, of terrible form, of transcendent radiance. I bow before you. Have mercy. I want to know who you are, who existed before all of creation." So this is one of the revelations. They are depicted in art, of course, in different ways. Here's another one. I just, pulled some of these off of the internet, and some of them aren't very high resolution, but you get the idea that multiple forms and faces. And then Krishna says to Arjuna, "I am time." Here's one that I kind of like because it shows a kind of holographic or fractal revelation where you see each of those bubbles contains also the same image of Krishna in a certain sense. And so it's like each part of the universe is a revelation of the whole universe in that kind of fractal or Indra's net type of revelation. And Krishna says, "I am time, the destroyer of all. I have come to consume the world. Arise, Arjuna." And he basically says, these warriors are already slain. And the reason for that is that all beings, all temporal beings, will come to an end. And so the whole idea is that everything that is manifested will come to an end. And we therefore must take refuge in that which is eternal. This is the whole key teaching, is we take refuge in that which is eternal, and that is Krishna. That is who we are, so that ultimately we identify with that which is eternal in us as the truth of who we are. And then Arjuna says, "Oh Krishna, it is right that the world rejoices in your praise, that all the saints and sages bow down to you, and all evil flees before you to the far corners of the universe. How could they not worship you? You are the eternal spirit who existed before Brahma and who will never cease to be. Lord of the gods, you are the abode of the universe. Changeless, you are what is and what is not. You are beyond the duality of existence and non-existence. You are the first among the gods, the timeless spirit, the resting place of all beings." So here's another image there. All of these are kind of from different Hindu representations of this supreme transcendent revelation of the Godhead to Arjuna. And then Arjuna apologizes for having not known. He says, "Sometimes because we were friends, I rashly said, 'Oh Krishna, say friend,' with my casual, careless remarks. Whatever I may have said in jest, when we were playing or resting, alone or in company, sitting together or eating, if I was in any way disrespectful, forgive me. For, O Krishna, I did not know the greatness of who you are, your nature, unchanging and imperishable. You are the Father of the universe, the Mother of the universe. You are Father of all animate and inanimate. You are the object of all worship. There is none equal to you." So these kind of understandable, expressions of humility, having now realized who Krishna really is, I rejoice in seeing you as you have never been seen. Yet I'm also filled with fear by this terrible vision of you. Please let me see you again as the shining God of gods in your four-limbed form. So he's really asking Krishna to return to the human incarnation because he kind of can't take it. And that's true. This vision of God burns the witness. And in a certain sense, here's Krishna praying for this transcendent revelation to come back into a human form so that Arjuna can behold him again. This vision of God cannot really be withstood. And so Krishna comes back, and then Krishna says this very important teaching to Arjuna. He says, through my grace, you have been united with me and received this vision of my radiant universal form without beginning or end, which no one else has ever seen. And then here it is again, this very important emphasis, not by knowledge of the Vedas, which you can think of as the scriptures, all scriptures, not by knowledge of the scriptures, nor by sacrifice, nor by charity, nor by rituals, nor even by severe asceticism, has any other mortal seen what you have seen, O heroic Arjuna. It is extremely difficult to obtain the vision you've seen. Even the gods long always to see me in this aspect. Neither by knowledge of the Vedas, nor austerity, nor charity, nor sacrifice. None of these can bring the vision you have seen. And then he says it again, but through unfailing devotion, Arjuna, you can know me, see me, and attain union with me. Those who make me the supreme goal of all their work and act without selfish attachment, who devote themselves to me completely and are free from ill will for any creature, enter into me. This verse, this last verse that I just read, according to Shankara, who you may know is like one of the greatest Hindu mystics of all time, Shankara, who really is the one responsible for Advaita Vedanta, that has been the primary transmission of Hinduism to the West, or one of the primary transmissions. And Shankara said that this verse, the last verse of chapter 11, summarizes the essence of the entire Gita. So through unfailing devotion, Arjuna, you can know me, see me, and attain union with me. Those who make me the supreme goal of all their work and act without selfish attachment, who devote themselves to me completely and are free from ill will toward any creature, they enter into me. So this is the very short summary of the essence of these verses. And it's very beautiful to share this with you. There's something about the power of the Gita in the way that it's laid out and the way that it builds to this crescendo, where then Krishna unveils himself first in the immanent revelation and then in the divine revelation. And this is the vision of God that is given to the pure of heart, that Jesus says, blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God. And it is really the illuminative vision. In the traditional Christian mysticism, there are three stages of the mystical journey. There is the purification, the illumination, and then the union. And so this is a radical form of the illumination, but it's not the end of the journey. Some people sometimes think this is the end of the journey, but it's not the end of the journey. Arjuna is still standing there as Arjuna, witnessing God, revealing the divine being to Arjuna. But the next stage of the journey is actually to take that step where through supreme devotion, Arjuna enters into God and God into Arjuna. And that duality is transcended in a radical union of oneness with the divine being. And as Krishna says here, this is written, something like somewhere between 1500 and 500 BC. There are definite references to the birth of Krishna in 700 BC, artistic references and scriptural references. So we know that Krishna, the whole essence of Krishna and the incarnation of Krishna is at least older than 700 BC. When the Gita was written is debated by different people, but basically somewhere between 500 BC at the earliest, at the latest. It's either 500 BC or earlier. And here is God in the form of Krishna bringing this revelation, basically saying, through the power of love and through the power of divine love, you will become one with me and enter into my being. And that is a promise. That is the divine promise from God to the human soul. So I think we're going to move into groups now, and then we'll come back for some closure and questions and reflections. So I'd invite you in these small groups to speak to whatever has touched you or inspired you or distressed you, perhaps, I don't know, whatever's been brought up for you by this teaching and by these kind of revelations from the Gita, and also your own connection to this devotion in the depths of the heart, and this whole sense of doing every action with a sense of a devotional offering to the Supreme. We have gone through this so quickly. The Gita goes through it in more detail, and we can continue to work with it over the next weeks and months. But the essence of it is what we're saying, and I've sort of tried to hit those highlights. So Garrett, if we're ready, we can go into
Before we move into groups,
yeah.
I'd just like to invite everyone to put your hands on your heart and then just focus in on your own devotion, whatever way that is. And then as you're ready, however you want to do it, just so we can get a little movement in our bodies, but do it in a way, a devotional way. So there's a way of praying, moving your prayers or dancing your prayers. So however you want to do it, if you want to raise your hands or move your body, but do it with that knowing and that offering, if you will, again, the offering to the divine or to your highest self, or however you conceptualize that. So just as you're ready, just moving your body up or out or in, however it feels good to you. Get a stretch in and do it with gratitude and appreciation for this one precious life that we've been given and the breath we've been given to do what we're here to do, whatever that is. And thank you, Will. What a beautiful offering you gave to me, I think to everyone, of just, and to feel your, and I know your devotion to this. So it's lovely to hear that and feel it in you. Yeah. Verna gave a thumbs up there. I see it. So, yeah, as we move into the groups, just let your heart open and move your shoulders back. Roll your neck. I see Garrett rolling his neck there. Yeah. So Garrett, as you're ready, we'll move into the groups. And if you don't have your camera on, again, it's helpful if you're able to put your camera on, so your group members can at least see your face, even for a moment. It just is hard to talk to a blank screen there with just a name. If that's possible, that'd be appreciated. See you shortly.
Okay.
Have a good time in the groups. See you in a bit.
And I'm just going to go ahead and say goodbye to our friends on YouTube Live. Thank you for joining us and take care. Have a good night.